Hi all, it's Steph Giordano with Human Services Research Institute, and this is the fifth and final refresher training module for the 2017-18 NCI Adult In-Person Survey. In this module, we're going to take a look at strategies for a successful meeting. As a very quick reminder, this is for those of you who have completed a full NCI training and are returning surveyors this year. All right, let's get into it. So every voice matters. One of the most important aspects of NCI is getting information directly from individuals and families who are receiving services. So in this survey, of course, we're trying to get the individual's perspective on their services and experiences. It's so important here that we ensure that we're trying to speak with every individual who is pulled into the sample, regardless of communication skill or style, and also taking the time to really make sure that people feel comfortable when you get to the meeting, that they feel that they're in a space in which they can give their opinions, that they're not going to have any negative consequences for answering your questions how they feel, even if maybe they have a less than positive response to some of the questions. So one of the ways that we can help people have a positive and comfortable experience answering these questions is getting to know how the person best communicates. We do provide a communication survey that can be used with family or staff or a person who knows how the individual communicates the best. The survey helps us determine if there are ways that the person can better understand questions, if there's a way that you can sit that maybe is better for the person. For instance, if they hear better on the left or right hand side, you can make sure to sit on that side when you set up the meeting. You can have a better understanding of how a person may think through a question. So perhaps they're quiet after you ask a question, and that just means they're thinking. Maybe they tell you a story, and that's how they get to their answer. Either way, we want to be sure before we get started with the survey that we are able to communicate in a way the person understands and is, again, feeling comfortable with. And then we get into this notion of remaining neutral. This is one of the most important, but also one of the most difficult aspects of surveying. Remaining neutral means that we do not do things like nod our head yes or no when a person responds to an answer. We also don't give feedback if a person, for instance, answers that they've been working at their job for several years and loves it. We don't say something like, oh, that's wonderful, although we may be happy for the person and want to give that positive feedback. Doing so may influence how they answer questions later if they feel that that was a sign that they answered correctly, or that the person is looking for additional affirmation from you on how they answer questions. We also don't want to give negative feelings back, making the person feel as though they answered in a negative way or made you feel badly in any way. One of the ways that we can remain neutral but also let the person know that we're hearing what they're saying is simply by restating the response that they just gave to us. We may also do things like ask an open-ended question after the person gives a response so that the person can tell you a little bit more about some aspect of their life that they may sound more interested or excited about. For instance, you may ask where the person has been working or what they do at their job. We also want to make sure that we do not let other people interrupt the survey. One of the easiest and most effective ways of making sure that others do not interrupt is conducting the survey one-on-one with the individual. Doing so means that there not only is not another person there to interrupt, but also the person may feel more comfortable and be more forthcoming, in particular with questions or responses that are perhaps more on the negative side of things. When it is the case that you have an additional person in the meeting, especially for section 1 of the survey, we suggest having that additional person sit behind the individual so as not to give nonverbal cues or perhaps even feel that they can give their responses along with the questions that are asked to only the individual. Having that additional person behind the individual giving responses takes them really physically out of the conversation and therefore often kind of stunts them from answering or responding in any way, verbal or non, to any of your questions. Finally here, do not overuse proxies. So again, although we do allow for proxies in section 2 of the survey, we only want proxies used if absolutely necessary or needed for completing that section, and certainly if the person needs or wants help responding to some of the questions in section 2. Tangential to this as well is not overusing that invalid section 1 response. We talked about this in the module around section 1, but again, making sure that even if a person is able to answer just 1 or 2 of the questions in section 1 in a valid and reliable manner, that we count those questions and then code the others as don't know, unclear, but that we keep those questions marked as valid, and so those questions can be used for analysis, and again, we're making sure that that person gets their voice heard, if only for those couple of questions. A little bit more here on creating a positive experience for the individual. These are really just kind of reminders that we are sure that you are all aware of, but here we go. Arriving on time. So this means that you don't show up late, of course, but also that you don't show up to a meeting 15-20 minutes early and expect the person to have been waiting on you. If you are able to arrive a little bit early, you can give the person a call and see if perhaps they may be able to meet earlier. If not, you keep the time as scheduled. If you're running late, which we know may happen on occasion, again, making sure that you call the person and finding out if that is okay for their schedule to push the meeting back a little bit. So find a quiet place to meet. This means typically that we want to avoid high traffic areas like a kitchen or living room where people are maybe coming in and out of the space a little more frequently. However, if that's the only sort of space to meet with the individual, you'll just want to let others in the house know that you'll have a private meeting going on and try to limit the amount of time people are coming back and forth through those rooms. It also means that we want to do things like turn down radios and TVs as much as possible. It's okay to blame yourself if there's a loud TV on in the background, just asking if it can be turned down because you're having a little difficulty hearing. We, however, never want to impede on the person's space, and especially if there are others around, making the most of whatever kind of space you have is important here. Of course, anytime you have to move anything in the home to sort of set up for the meeting, be sure that you move it back to its proper place. Finally here, be respectful of the person's time and your own. This doesn't only mean that we arrive at the meeting on time, but that we really give the person and anybody else who may be involved in the meeting a good sense of how much time this may take. Typically, we say that the survey takes on average about an hour to complete. However, this can take longer for some individuals. It can be shorter for others. But when we talk about this average 1 hour, it's really about the conversation taking place during section 1 and section 2. It doesn't account for time that you may need to find a meeting space or set it up in any way, and it doesn't account for time that may take to explain the project to the individual or to others around you. This also means that when you schedule your meetings, you don't do too many in one day. We often say the max you may want to schedule is around 3 per day, but really you want to make sure that you're giving yourself the opportunity to get from meeting to meeting, but also to give yourself time to breathe and to kind of decompress after each meeting. So again, making sure that you're respectful of how much time you have and need to conduct these meetings. And just a final few reminders before we wrap up this refresher training. So we do have a number of additional resources for you all, including the 2017-18 Surveyor Handbook. This is that handbook that goes through all of the questions in the IPS survey, background information section 1 and section 2, and offers some additional explanations and definitions for each of those questions. We have that communication survey, which I mentioned earlier in this module. We also have a proxy video showing the interaction of a surveyor talking with an individual who ultimately needs a proxy to complete section 2 of the survey. Please always talk to your NCI coordinator throughout the year if you have any questions or concerns that come up about surveying, protocols, or anything else having to do with the project. And finally, have fun with this. We have such positive feedback from surveyors as well as individuals who have the survey completed. We really want you all to enjoy this experience and opportunity that you'll have to talk to a number of individuals throughout the year. Thank you all so much for listening to this refresher training. If you do have any questions about this or need access to additional resources, again, do not hesitate to get in contact with me or your NCI coordinator. Thanks so much.